Everyone, good morning and good evening to those of you who are joining from another time zone. I'm Deepak, and for next 1 hour, I'm going to help you understand how to vibe code in PM interviews. And this is like the first episode actually with a series I'm launching, which is How to X with AI. So how to vibe code in PM interviews is a very interesting topic, right? And the reason sort of I started writing about this last week is because that's something I've been doing for last few years. So I started with writing Growth Catalyst newsletter, for those of you who don't know. Started with growth, I think currently writing around AI and product management. This has grown to like 15,000 subscribers. Wrote a book in 2022, which became a bestseller in PM circles. And for last 2.5 years, I've been running pmcurve, which focuses on advanced product leadership skills, something like product sense and strategy, growth, and now AI. Now, relevant to this discussion, because I definitely believe that a speaker should share credentials when talking about certain topics. So when it comes to AI, I have been working with AI products for the last 10 years. It started with the first startup I joined after college, which is housing.com. And this continued with Upgrad, where I built the data science and data engineering teams. Upgrad is now a $3 billion company. And then at Flipkart, I was leading voice search and assistant, right? So something similar to Alexa, which is a product for Amazon. And even at PMCo, we are working on our own set of AI products, right? So for last 10 years, I've seen this area evolving through various stages. And so far, at least like till 2023, in fact, 2022 is when GPT came in. But even in 2023, AI was a secondary thought for most of the organizations. In 2025, because of onset of agents and a lot of like improvement in foundational models, we have seen companies actually taking AI very, very seriously, right? So in that pursuit of seriousness, this vibe coding interview has been introduced. So the session agenda is going to be like the core skill. We'll start with core skills. We will also talk about like different questions, categories, and formats. And then we'll go to like how to apply a framework to solve an interview problem that you get in one of the vibe coding interviews. And finally, I'll wrap this session with something which is a thinking tool for you, which is like, given that vibe coding is very, very new, it can be a lot more confusing and you're prone to get a lot of mixed advice. So we are going to discuss what a good response looks like and what a good question even looks like, because you don't want to go to an interview. This especially happens in startups, right? Not because of lack of intent, but because of lack of experience. That somebody reads something like on a blog post, they'll ask you that question, but that question might not be a good question, right? So we'll talk about what a good question looks like so that when you face a question, you know how to respond to it. So this is like broadly the session agenda. When it comes to questions, because I'm sure this is a live session, and the reason we're conducting this live session is because I want you to ask questions. You can add these questions into the chat. I pick questions directly from the chat. If I see that whatever I'm discussing is actually related to the question, but for the rest of the questions, we'll tackle them towards the end of the session. Okay. So before we start, I'll just check the chat box and see if there are any questions. No questions so far. Let's move forward. Just give me a minute. So my first question to you is like, have you seen this particular Reddit post around I messed up my Google PM vibe coding interview? Most of you have. Okay. So this became very popular in PM circles, and partly because of two reasons. One, I think a lot of PM creators, like creators who write around product management, actually picked it up. And the second is because it was related to Google, and Google is not known for adding a surprise to interviews, right? In fact, like if you have been through Google process, you'll realize that recruiters actually explain you everything step by step, and you don't face a lot of surprises in the interviews. So as long as you're prepared, I think you'll do well with Google interviews. And to that end, it was even a surprise for me because my first reaction was, is this even true? I think the verification is still left. Some people have claimed that, yeah, it happened and all. But no matter what, I think the deeper question to ask when I saw this is like, is this something that companies should value? Even whether it's true or not is a different thing, but is this something where the companies are actually going towards, right? And that led to basically the post that I wrote on July 22nd, this last month, right? Which was complete guide to master the vibe coding PM interviews. And usually I'm able to sort of tackle, you can check this post if you haven't by going to newsletter.pmcurve.com. And normally, like when I write posts, it's self-sufficient. But in this case, what I realized is it's not enough to just write about it because it contained everything around theory. But when it comes to actually showing people how to solve a particular problem, that is where writing fails, right? When you're trying to show people how to do something, that is where I think a video or live interaction is way better. And that led to genesis of this session. And just, I think a couple of days back, again, another product leader from Google made this remark, which I'm sure like some of you have not seen it. Right? So at Google, we are moving from writing first culture to building first one. Writing was a proxy for clear thinking, optimized for scarce engineering resources and long dev cycles. You have to get it right before you build. Now, when time to vibe code prototype is equal to time to write PRD, PMs can show, not tell. Right? It's an interesting, I would say it's an interesting evolution, something that we have seen at pmcurve also while building our own AI interviewer product. But nonetheless, like, again, there are two sides of even this argument, which is one is like, for example, if you ask me personally, and it is a personal question, by the way, like the clarity that I get from writing does not come from vibe coding. So I personally like to write, even if I don't show this writing to anyone. So even if some of the leaders that I'm working with tell me to go and vibe code something, I'll first write because that's what brings clarity to my thought process. But again, like I said, this is a very, very personal question to all of you, right? And depending on like what brings clarity to your head, a lot of people are visual thinkers. So I feel that they will vibe code first and then they will write, and which is the right approach for them. So I would say don't look at like such advices as gospel of truth. This is not the truth. This is the truth that people are sharing about themselves, right? Or about their own organizations. I would still say make this decision for you. But before making that decision, make sure that you master all these tools, right? You can't make this decision if you don't know how to vibe code. You can only make this decision after you know how to vibe code, how to do AI prototyping, how to build AI products and all that, right? So master the tools, but let the process come to you depending on who you are, right? And with that, I'll start with the first segment, which is the core skills. Now, this might be a little repetitive for people who have gone through the post that I wrote, but it is actually important for narrative consistency. So just hold on with me. I promise like there will be more nuggets beyond the post when I go through these topics. Sanchari has this comment around, I actually thought it was understood since you can't show non-functional things on vibe code. I think that is understood. And thanks for pointing that out. But again, like I said, people will read it in their own context. And I got some people from my community asking Deepak, like, should we stop writing PRDs? And I'm like, no, please don't do that. Okay. So the first thing is the core skills needed is the first place where we have to start. So core skills needed for even the vibe coding interviews, because vibe coding is a skill. It's not an interview round, if you ask me honestly. It's a skill that is getting added to interviews, same as user segmentation was added to PM interviews, same as success metrics were added to PM interviews. It's a skill like data, like user research, user empathy, segmentation, market understanding, strategy. Core, one of the like core skills that is getting added to PM interviews is AI prototyping. And you'll see that like as we go through this session, you'll see that different kind of questions can be asked. And one of the subcomponents on answering those questions is actually vibe coding interview, vibe coding that particular thing. So the core skill needed are still like, even in these questions that feel like if the hiring manager explicitly tells you that what I'm looking for is, can you build this product? Even then, the core skill is not AI prototyping. That is one of the sub skills. The core skill is still like product sense or design. The core skill is technical system design. The core skill is RCS. All right. Because if you don't know these core skills, you would still feel at a UI prototyping, even if you have done a course around UI prototyping, or even if you have built some UI prototypes of your own. So that's the first thing to understand. And the way to explain this is something, again, that I wrote a long time back now, which was drawing a parallelism between PM job and interview. So whenever I am confused on like why this particular thing is being asked, or like when a clarification question comes from an interviewer, the key question that you need to ask is, what is the question behind the question, right? And question behind the question is often related to the core job that you're supposed to do. So in that sense, everything that comes in interviews is geared towards testing the skills that you need to do your job well, right? And vibe coding interviews are just that. Like, vibe coding is included because there is shift in PM roles and responsibilities, as we are seeing, as we saw like Madhu claiming that, as we saw like some interviewee claiming that in Google round, and as we will see in a lot of interviews, right? Even if I'm interviewing PMs today for, let's say, AI products, I would definitely want them to be good at this skill, right? So this is going to be a component of the interview rounds. And in that sense, if we break down the skills, the core skills, because I covered the core skills, but I didn't broke it down in the post. So product sense or design is all about like clarifying questions, defining the scope, segmentation, user empathy, business sense to define impact, and finally prioritization. And some people can add like success metrics to it, but yeah, I think you can always clarify that if you want to add that. But this is broadly what product sense and design has been all about. UI prototyping subskills are like using tools like Lovable, Cloud Code, Replit. You can, in fact, most of these interviews, they will ask you to choose a tool depending on what you feel about the problem. And my sense is, again, don't take that option as like, I just have to master one tool, because the matter of the fact is every tool is evolving. Every tool has some limitations, which means that you should be picking 2 or 3 different kind of tools and you should be working with them. Even if you master one of them, you should be working with 2 or 3 different kind of tools. And that is the reason I have put 3 different kind of tools here. Like Lovable is end-to-end, you can build an app and even launch it in production with certain number of users. Cloud Code is more around, you can build a very clean UI with Cloud Code today. Developers can write components of code using Cloud Code, but you're not developers. So I'm just going to stick with the UI, basic UI. And the third is Replit, which is moving more towards a AI developer agent, right? So it's a AI agent which can develop end-to-end just if you give it the objective of the problem. So depending on what the question is, you can actually pick a different tool. And that is why, like, you should be mastering 2 or 3 different set of tools. One that is good with UI, one that is good with UI plus backend, and one that is good with agentic. And over time, you have to track the evolution of these tools so that you can actually do good with it, right? So that's the first thing. The second is prompt engineering. Now, prompt engineering is very, very misunderstood. And the reason is because I'm yet to meet PMs who have invested heavily in like understanding and mastering prompt engineering. And when I say like understanding and mastering prompt engineering, the only place to go for that, in my mind, is to go to research papers. So there are like systematic overview research papers written. If you go to any of the like research paper websites, there are systematic review of prompt engineering research papers written by people. But then there are also like individual research papers written around certain techniques, like COT has its own paper, chain of thought. Tree of thought has its own paper, thread of thought has its own paper. And these are like reasoning skills, but then there are also like self-refine and all these techniques. So I would say if you are a PM, I would expect you to go to these techniques rather than saying that, these are like, what is the most popular prompt engineering advice? Give it a persona and then follow the star framework. People say like context and all, but I think for PMs, it's simpler if you just follow the star framework, right? You talk about the situation, you talk about situation, which is the context, you talk about what the task is, what is the objective, you talk about do's and don'ts, which is action, and then you finally share the format of the result you want in. And then that appended with few short technique, right? Which is like, give it some examples if you want. But even then, the question, for example, like a PM, I want a PM to go to is, does few short works everywhere? And the answer is actually not. Like, I'm just picking this instance. Like, I don't want to overwhelm you. But the thing is, people have found that in reasoning models, few short techniques actually don't work that well. In fact, they constrain or degrade the performance of reasoning models. And yet we are writing like the prompts just like we used to write for other models in 2023, 2024. We are just bringing those practices in, even if like a lot of under the hood things are changing. And so my advice is like, in prompt engineering, I would want you to go more advanced than what is available on, let's say, YouTube or LinkedIn, or even in the blog posts that are being written, because most of the content is just being repurposed for consumption, right? And most of the content is also written to bring optimized for bringing likes and shares, right? Which happens to be the content on the gate. But if you want to be a very excellent PM, you can't stay on with the content on the gate. You have to go beyond that. And that is where the less number of people are actually available. And which is why when you write around those topics, you'll not garner those many views, or it will not become more popular, because that is hard to consume. That is hard to understand, right? So prompt engineering is a very, very sort of interesting topic. And even if like, there are people who are saying that prompt engineering is dead, context engineering has come in and all that, both are very different things, right? And without going into deep, I believe like this is not the right session, but possibly how to prompt engineer is going to be a session in how to X with AI, maybe third or fourth session. So I'll go deeper into that. So just be on a lookout for that, how to prompt engineering with AI. So that's the second skill. And the third skill is design sense, which again is something, for example, if you ask me, while I can say I'm good at like UX design, I'm not good at UI design. Like there are things which I'll obviously miss in UI. And I had to actively work on that skill, at least for like a couple of years, to just get to a good level. Because that is not something which was colors and fonts, and these things were not very intuitive to me. They are still like, I would say I'm still not in the top 5% of PMs there, right? So you have to understand like the design sense, because you are never supposed to do this in your job. You are supposed to think about UX, less about UI. And yet like you'll find some PMs who are excellent at UI. That goes without saying. But if you are a PM, you never had to exercise your design sense to the extent that you're picking fonts, you're talking about design system, you're thinking about like font color, and all these things on a screen. Even copywriting, for example, copywriting is what your marketers did. Copywriting is what your designers did. You didn't do that. But copywriting and UI becomes very, very important when it comes to UI prototyping or prototyping of any kind, right? As long as it's consumer facing. So that's, this is the section I wanted to spend a lot of time on, because I believe that product sense or design is something that you already understand. UI prototyping is where we are actually. And if you're still sort of lost, I think this is just a free AI prototyping course. This is like 10 hours of content, some live sessions I did in April this year. You can just go and you can go through this course on pmcurve.com and get ready for the next evolution of AI prototyping, right? So those are like two core skills. The third core skill is technical system design. And this is, again, something that you'll realize comes handy when you are doing AI prototyping, because you have to define the data model. In fact, if you define the data model or DB schema and give it to these large language models, be it like Lovable, be it any other sort of interface you're using, they're way better at designing this entire thing. And the reason is because this DB schema actually constrains the boundaries which they need to capture. And it makes them work within those constraints, within those boundaries. And that is why they're able to come up with a better output. Think of it like the way we humans operate, right? If you give an associate product manager some DB schema and ask them to design this screen, they'll be able to do it better. And the same is true about LLMs, which is like, rather than giving a very, very broad mandate, you're asking them that this is the data model that I've defined. This is the DB schema I've defined. These are the tables. And because of that, it is able to understand your instructions way better. And because of that, it is able to focus on your instructions and give you a much better output. The second thing is understanding of authentication and authorization, because no matter which question you face, this can come in handy. So definitely spend some time learning about how to build authentication and authorization flow. What are different design choices? What are different product choices? Why do you take those choices? For example, if you're building a product for India, do you want to build a Gmail-based login for a B2C app? You most definitely don't want to. But if you're building something for US, where people don't do that much of phone number-based login, you might go for it. So that's basically authentication and authorization is very, very important. The third is understanding APIs. Now, you just need to understand APIs. You just need to understand how to read APIs. And believe me, when I say that, like, while it may feel very, very daunting, it's very easy. If you just sort of go through it once or twice, if you just read it like English language, you'll be able to understand it. And the fourth is around domain hosting. Now, I don't feel that people would ask you to host domains in an interview, but still it will give you a lot more confidence if you can take this code, push it to GitHub, and then do some hosting. And all it takes is maybe like 30 minutes of your time. If you're again not sure, just go to the free AI prototyping course and you should be good there. The last one is the most important and the most difficult one, which is the RCA. Now, RCA is where these AI systems actually fail. And that is why this is very, very difficult, because so far, if you look at the first three, technical system design, UI prototyping, product sensor design, you can even ask AI for the inputs. But when it comes to RCA, AI does not fare that well, because it keeps, if you have used these tools, it keeps going in loops. And it keeps it keeps writing more lines of code. It keeps bloating the code, but it does not actually solve the problem. And that is where, like, I would say, like, just understand like how to do RC, how to find bugs, how to troubleshoot bugs. And this is something which can require a lot, I would say, a lot deeper session to actually do it. But the best way to actually do it is by doing it yourself. The confidence that you gain by getting into a loop, getting stuck into it, finding a friend who can help you, finding an engineer who can help you, or finding some PM who can help you is a lot easier way to learn it and a lot better way to build confidence than sitting through, let's say, 5 hours of session and actually learning that, right? Just make sure that you have the support system available. You have a friend who is an engineer who can help you, or a PM who is good at AI prototyping who can help you. And so this is like the order of difficulty, if you ask me. RCA is way more difficult. And then there is technical system design, which you have to learn now. So far, it was, I would say, optional, but now you have to learn it. And then there is UI prototyping, and then there is system design. Not system design, actually. This is product design or product sense. Now, the reason I say like product sense or product design is easy because most of you are PMs. So you have like some understanding of this. But these are the areas where you need to invest in and go in this order, like start from here, like go to UI prototyping, go to tech system design, and go to RC. Okay. So the new expectation, like I said, the new expectation in interviews also come from shift in PM roles and responsibilities. And that is basically you have to be more technical as a PM. You have to learn prompt engineering and show that skill in the interview so that I know that you are better than most people that I meet. And then finally, you have to learn AI tools for prototyping. Now, we'll quickly cover like question categories and formats and then jump and spend some time on how to solve a problem. Now, question categories can be of three kinds. The first is UI only, which is design a landing page. Now, landing page does not require a backend. Maybe it requires a form for lead generation and all, but it does not require a proper backend with multiple tables and tables talking to each other. It does not require authentication, authorization flow, and all that. So there could be a very simple like design a product, or the more advanced could be like design an AI prototype for a fully functional product, right? I will remove this AI term because design a prototype for a fully functional product in itself is sufficient. And this is where you have to add a database, you have to define data model, you have to do like system design very, very quickly and give the instruction to the LLM so that you can do it. And the third, which is something that you will not get unless you are interviewing for AI PM role, which is different than product management, which is like you are supposed to build AI features in a particular role. And that is where like you need to understand how to use APIs from LLMs and how to optimize the output. So that is where you will go into, RAG fine tuning. Fine tuning is not something that you will face in interviews, but you might get some questions around when to fine tune, when to not. But RAG fine tuning, agentic tools, and all those things, system prompt versus user prompt and all that. Right. Now in this session, like we are going to focus just on the design a UI product. And while it, again, like designing that using the LLM is possibly the 5 minutes job, but still it's a 30 minutes interview and you'll see why. Now, in the next session, possibly I'll pick a UI plus backend plus APIs because now that I've set the context, it becomes very, very easy for you to go and like cover the rest of the two in a single session, right? So so these are like the kind of questions. The formats can be live coding, which is like live coding, live prototyping. It could be take home assignments, or it could be take home assignment plus presentation. So the third is something which companies like Uber do, where they give you some assignment to do, and then they will have a panel with which you can sit and you can discuss, and they will ask questions and all that. And again, the skills that they're testing, like I said, there's parallel between job interview and role. The skill that Uber is testing is because it's a very, very cross-functional org. They want to test how you present ideas to different stakeholders. What do you do when you are, do you get defensive when you're asked a question which actually negates your point of view? So they want to understand how good you are in interacting with people along with how good you are with solving problems, right? For example, I remember my interview with Uber in 2019 when they pressed me that this is like the proposal that I had. They were like, we are already implementing it in some other geographies. I don't think we should be moving in India with what you have proposed. Like, what is your thought on that? So it was very clearly like, these are the questions you face in real interactions with business stakeholders, marketing, or even product leadership. So take home assignment plus presentation is, if you ask me, like it's one of my favorite formats. But I believe that the most popular format is going to be take home assignment, and followed by basically asking you to do a prototype live. Okay. So let's go to the framework, right? So this is the framework that you get for product sense problems. And this framework is going to get like more or less untouched. So it's basically product sense plus framework is something that you can think around. And it starts with basically you start with asking clarifying questions about users, goals, and constraints of the problem so that you can define the scope of the problem. And then you talk about user segments. Then you go into prioritizing a segments and their needs, same as you go in product sense problems. Then you talk about solutions. So far, this has been a product sense interview as you can see. And that is where you narrate the solution core features and list nice to haves and all that. And after this, this takes a little detour where you talk about the system design of MVP, where you say that this is how the data model is going to be, this is how this particular thing is going to happen. And you take feedback on this from the interviewer just to make sure that you're not going into a different direction. And then you pick a tool which is actually ideal for this kind of MVP. And you build this entire MVP using one of the tools. You talk about it while building. So while building, you'll see like I'll build it using Claude, but I'll keep talking when I'm building it. So I'll try to imitate that experience for you. And finally, do a comprehensive QA. And in here, like they're also seeing how do you debug systematically in case you face a problem. And if you have done all of this in 30 minutes, then of course you can talk about success criteria and all that. But my sense is you have to be very, very wary of the time in this particular interview format. This is more challenging than most product interviews you have done, because you have to show like life skills, and things can go wrong for the first time, right? So far, like you could talk well, you could think well, you could communicate well, and everything was fine. But suddenly you are handed over a probabilistic model, which is LLMs. And now basically you have to make sure that it does not gives you a wrong output. At the same time, you have to be ready to get a wrong output and correct it, right? And which is why when we talk about the evaluation criteria for these interviews, it's going to be different than what we have been taught around product sense and strategy interviews. So just hold on to that thought. And let's get into a problem, okay? So suppose a problem is this, which is create a feedback form that adapts based on user ratings. Now, rather than walking you through it, let me take this problem to Miro and basically hold the conversation with you while sort of solving this problem, right? So when we are asking about creating a feedback form that adapts based on user ratings, there are a few things that become important. Now, this is a very, very open-ended problem. And by the way, like just like before I start, I want to make this distinction very, very clear. I think most of you have seen mock interviews done on YouTube, where there is an interviewer, there is an interviewee, and they're trying to answer this question. In my mind, I don't actually like that format that much, because it does not gives you the how to think in these interviews, right? And which is where like you can see an interview get wowed by it, but when it comes to actually applying it, you'll not be applying most of it. So this thing that I'm doing, this is more around how to think in vibe coding interviews, right? So that is the expectation with what I'm going to do in next 20 minutes. So create a feedback form that adapts based on user ratings. If you are thinking about this, the first question that most of you should get, depending on the seniority level, of course. But the first question, if you're a senior PM, is basically, are we talking about a platform or are we talking about a product? And the reason this is important is, depending on whether it's basically I'm doing it for Amazon as an Amazon PM, or I'm doing it for SurveyMonkey, the answer could be different. Now, for SurveyMonkey, I'll make very different design choices, because what I'm trying to do is SurveyMonkey caters to a lot of B2B and enterprise and SMB sort of customers, some even like B2C customers. But Amazon is building it for internal consumption. So the design choices will be very, very different. So is it a platform or product? And suppose, like, for sake of simplicity, we are keeping it as a product. Now, the second thing that you're just trying to narrow down the scope of the problem. The second thing that you're going to ask is basically, will it be used if it is for Amazon? Is it like, does it need to be basically journey agnostic? Which is, can it be used by at any point of this particular user journey, right? And if you are a senior PM, mostly the answer from the interview is going to be yes, because what they don't want to do is they don't want to give you a very narrow scope. But if you are an APM who is interviewing for this, or a PM who is interviewing for this, they can say that, okay, maybe like just create a feedback form that gets live towards the end of the order, right? Because when the order is delivered, that is where we want most of the things to most of the ratings to be collated. But if you are a senior PM, they want to give you more broad problem statement, and they want to see your skill to actually narrow down and come to the most important parts, right? And because we find this, I think what you now are left with is not a single point for which you have to create a feedback form, but more like a internal platform approach that you'll have to take. So now what you want to do here is basically, you can say that while I'll go into a journey agnostic platform, which can be a platform tomorrow, for now, I want to focus on the feedback part, because going this, if we are saying that this is going to be journey agnostic, this can be used by different teams, isn't it? Like, I'm not the only PM who is designing surveys or surveys for consumers or sellers. There are different teams which will be using it, and that means they need different logins, different level of access, because information access is also something that you have to think about. But even here, while clarifying, you can say that for the scope of this interview, I'm not going to get into that. And again, the question behind the question here, right? Or the intent behind this response is this, because you want to show that you can think that this is how a real product will be built. But because we just have 30 minutes, I'm going to skip that. So this is a very, very important point to cover if you are interviewing for senior roles, which is you actually show them that this is what you will do when a real product like this is getting built. But of course, you are also going to make a judgment call that because of the scope of the interview, we are going to skip this part. So here, let's say I say that, okay, while it's journey agnostic, I don't want to take an internal platform view right now because it will require a lot more discussion. What I want to focus on is basically different points of journey for user and pick a place where this could be most beneficial, right? And let's prototype for that. And then we can think about how to expand this for other use cases, right? So pick the most impactful part. Of journey, right? Now that you are here, now the question is, how do you pick the most impactful part? And that is going to be defined by the goal of this product, isn't it? We have not talked about goals yet. So goal of this product is mostly going to be like, if I'm the interviewer and if you're asking me, Deepak, what's the goal of the product? I will say like, we just want to maximize revenue, or we want to maximize CSAT. And as an interviewer, I would expect you to understand the correlation between the two, because you might say that, okay, if it's revenue, are we going to make a different design choice versus if it's maximizing CSAT? In this case, the answer is no. So you can say that we'll pick revenue as the goal because that serves business also. And we also know that more satisfaction usually leads to more revenue, right? So let's pick revenue as the goal. And we'll make choices consistent with this. And by now you have created the shape of the problem. This is the first part of the problem that you need to tackle in the first 5 minutes of the interview. The next 5 minutes is where you go into discussing user segments, right? And user segments here, if you look at the user segments here, the segmentation is actually the dimensions of segmentation is, in fact, like, so for folks who don't understand dimension, right? So there are different ways to do user segmentation. One is basically behavioral segmentation. One is age, gender, demographic segmentation and all that. But possibly the best way, if you are a PM, to think about segmentation is to think in dimensions, which is basically what are the dimensions on which different segments will have different needs. So for example, you can say that new users versus returning users possibly will require a very different flow, not in the survey, but a different flow, because the logic for refund, the logic for a lot of things will actually vary, which is the goal of a survey, right? The logic for delivering experience based on this survey will vary for new user versus returning user. So this could be one segment. The second is basically where are they in their journeys, right? So for example, even for new user versus returning user, is it like pre-purchase survey or is it like post-purchase survey? Right? So new user versus returning user, pre-purchase versus post-purchase. And you can say that while prioritizing this segment, given that we are doing it for Amazon, my sense is to maximize revenue, I would focus on returning users because Amazon has acquired most of the users. That is possible. And new users are just a minority for Amazon. And if you vet this thing with the interviewer, they might say that, no, let's focus on new users because we are actually doubling down on acquisition and so on and so forth. So sometimes interviewer will just throw you a ball to say like how you react, and you can pick NU also. And then basically pre versus post purchase, you're going to say that we will focus on post purchase experience because that is where like most of the dissatisfaction happens. So if you want to maximize CSAT, we don't need to do a pre-purchase experience like survey and optimize that experience much because that is mostly driven by search and recommendations. We can do improvements there. We should run like market research surveys there, but mostly we want to make sure that people don't have a bad experience post-purchase or post-delivery, right? After delivery. So this is where like you say, okay, we'll focus on returning users post-delivery. So post-delivery, like the survey that gets rolled down to them. And by now, like you have decided on, let's say, this kind of user segment. The next thing you can move on is basically talking about their pain points and prioritizing some pain point. Now, the thing is, this is where this becomes very, very interesting. In a normal interview, you will spend entire 30 minutes just talking about these things, but you're not in a normal interview. You're supposed to build this. And which is where I want you to actually like not go this. You can talk about this a lot, which is a bit actually. You can say that we know that returning users actually sort of are our priority customers because they expect better because they have seen us operating. Whereas new users, they are not, they don't know what Amazon is. They know Amazon through their friends and family, but this is their first point of contact. So we have to be extra careful in new users. We have some leeway in returning users, but at the same time, we can lose them. It can lead to loss of retention and it can lead to loss of revenue and all that, not to mention word of mouth and all that. You can talk about post-delivery experience. The pain points in post-delivery are this, this, and this. But mostly, while you're designing, this is going to anyway go into the requirement. So at this point, once you are decently confident about the user segment and the broad pain point, I would want you to dive directly into the vibe coding mode. Okay. So just like reviewing whatever we discussed, right? Defining goal for this feedback form, which is product, multiple teams, stage independent, revenue impact, user segment, post delivery, users, maybe like returning users, not new users. And then basically prioritizing a segment and their needs, right? So here, like while solving this, I took a very different path and I said that, okay, maybe NU drop off at some stage because 80% of NUs actually drop off at some stage and all that. But for now, let's keep the returning user sort of narrative that we built. And this is just to show you that you can take any path and deliver a good product sense or AI prototype for that user, right? What matters is you are able to clearly think and communicate and decide on the trade-offs. And believe me when I say that, the interviewer, if you ask some data from interviewer, it becomes much, much easier to prioritize, especially in this case, right? But if there is no data, make intelligent assumptions. For example, like Amazon has already acquired most of the users, so we should focus on returning users because they are the majority and all that. Now, this is where like solution, like when you're solutioning, this is where like you can say that rating. So these are the things that I wrote, right? So you can just read it out. I'll read out for you. Rating post delivery on website or via email if it is a US customer versus whether it's an Indian consumer, right? So Indian consumers, you can take rating on WhatsApp because email is not available to most of the Indian consumers, right? Then you say, okay, the core features may I'll try to rate on a scale of 1 to 5 because it feels easier than 1 to 10 cognitively, right? 1 to 5 is also sharper. So possibly I'll design it like that. And here you're consciously calling out that I'm choosing one thing versus other. And this will actually transfer this, what do you say? Transfer this skill to the interviewer that you can entertain choices and you usually entertain choices while making a choice rather than saying plainly that I'll go for 1 to 10 scale and all that, right? If the rating is 1 to 2, ask what went with the order, provide options like item quality, delivery experience, different item delivered and all that. Based on the options, educate them on return or refund and promise that we'll take note and improve this for future orders, right? If rating is 3, then ask what could have been better. If rating is 4 or 5, then tell us what you liked. So in this way, like, so I think segmentation and pain points you quickly skipped rather than elaborating on it because pain point is very, very clear. Like it's basically Amazon wants to understand the feedback and users need to give the feedback and get return or refund or whatever like Amazon promises them for. So you didn't spend a lot of time there, but you can spend some time building this solution because this shows, again, another thing that you could do is you can just go to Claude and you can say that create a feedback form that adapts based on user rating. In fact, let's just for fun, let's try to do that. So suppose I go here and I say, this is the output we are getting. Okay. We'll see. We'll come back to this output. But the reason I don't advise you to go via that route is first, like you lose the opportunity to show that you can think on your feet. If you start using LLM for writing these requirements without clarifying questions, without constraining scope, without talking about the segment and everything, it just goes on to show that you don't have that great product sense. And believe me when I say that product sense over time can get invisible, because what is happening is if you see the latest trends, companies are getting into product execution round. And I would say vibe coding is actually a product execution round. Analytical round where they can actually test your skills. But in all those rounds, product sense is certainly invisible. It shows in like how you talk about users, how you talk about, see, this is the experience that you get, right? What did you love most? Would you recommend us? Any suggestion for improvement? This is something that I would not even expect an APM to build. So compare this, where we feel that AI LLMs are the answer to our thing. Compare this with what we have arrived here. And in the interest of time, I think what I will do is, let me see if I can pull the chat that I had around this so that we can focus more on the meaty thing and focus less on, waiting for LLM to respond to certain questions that we have. Yeah, so I can find that. So this is how I wrote, because see, again, the question, another thing that you need to ask is, do you write a full-fledged prompt? Like, do you write the perfect prompt? What could happen is, and I want you to avoid those sort of mock interview sessions that you are going to go through on YouTube and all. Don't look at mock interview sessions which have perfected the prompt already and they have given that prompt to the LLM and then the LLM is actually spitting out, because the core is actually perfecting that prompt. And if the prompt is already perfected, that is not something you'll expect yourself to do in interviews. It happens with other mock interviews also, right? Where you know that the person has prepared for that mock interview when they have come on video to shoot about it. And because of which you don't get to see the flaws that these people get through when they are in real interviews. And because of which, similar to what happens with Instagram, right? Where you see influencers living a certain life, you also create unrealistic benchmarks for you when it comes to interviews. I would say don't do that to yourself. It will just degrade your confidence. And even if you are great, like, in fact, usually if you are great, you would start doubting yourself, right? Because most good people actually also have imposter syndrome of some sort. Okay, so in that interest, these prompts are imperfect, right? What I've just done is, this is something that I expect you to do without LLM, right? This is something that we wrote while solving this problem. And then I want you to feed this into LLM by adding a role. Act as a product expert, help me create this, that based on, here are my notes. Please create, and this is what, right? Please create a requirement doc. I'm first going for a requirement doc, because what I don't want LLM to do is to work on an imperfect requirement that misses something and just create something. So this is the requirement doc I got. Executive summary, objective. It's pretty good if you ask me. Clear labeling, adaptive follow-up logic. These are the response options. And while you are going through it with the interviewer, I want you to comment on this. You'll comment exactly like, this is good. I think the labeling is good. The response options are many. We want to reduce the number of response options because we don't want to overwhelm the user. And it will also lead to a reduction in the response rate. Post-selection actions, again, you don't need to read it out, the entire thing, right? But you can say, okay, this looks good. We'll see if we want to change something. Follow-up question, again, too many options. High satisfaction, this looks good. Again, we have to reduce options. Delivery channels, India, US, we don't want to get into that right now because let's focus on just one geography, form behavior, data collection, integration points. Technical requirements, again, we don't want to get into there. Timing, send feedback request 24 to 48 hours post delivery. Okay, that's something that I need to think. Include order details, language support. Let's keep it simple. So we are going to just say that let's just keep like English and all. And then there is content. So this looks decent. You don't want to spend more than 2 to 3 minutes on this. You just want to take a cursory look, and you're going to say this one, self-critique, again, a prompting technique. Now critique the document we just created for gaps or improvements that you're highly confident about, That is the key. In fact, sometimes I will say that you're 95% confident about. Back with data wherever possible, and suggest improvements for critiques only when you are 90% confident, because otherwise it like LLMs go haywire. In fact, Claude is still a better one, but if you go to ChatGPT or Gemini, they go haywire. They will add so many suggestions that it's impossible for you to filter through it in an interview setup, right? So it talks about actually good things: response rate benchmarks, no survey fatigue prevention, missing mobile first design, timing, no incentive, WhatsApp compliance missing, insufficient analytics, and all that. Now my goal is to pick some of them and say which are relevant. For example, this WhatsApp one, we already said we don't want to focus on multiple things. We just want to create a simple form for now. Insufficient analytics, we don't want to focus in AI prototyping. Progressive profiling, we don't want to do that. Incentive, we don't want to give. Inadequate timing. Timing is where I want to focus. Mobile first, again, we can think later. Survey fatigue, we need to prevent. And response rate is something that I care about. So I say, just take these, right? And take out the parts not relevant for MVP. And now my requirement doc is much smaller and much more focused. Okay. And then again, this is something that I keep doing because I think my primary job is actually to research with LLMs and help educate PMs. So then I please fact check the data into the document. So it starts fact checking. Now, remember, I already said that only include things you are very confident about, but it didn't listen to me then. Now I'm saying, just like now that we have the focus document, please highlight and remove data that is not backed by reliable sources. And this is where the magic happens, right? Now, if you do this, what is the signal you are giving to the interviewer? The interviewer is, this is a person who is very thoughtful when using LLMs. They're not using LLMs to just create any random document. They're fact checking everything. They're making it concise. They're making it specific. They're reviewing it and so on and so forth. But they are really good with using LLMs, which means I can see this PMs actually sitting and delivering a PRD in 30 minutes. And that PRD won't be written by an LLM. This will be co-written by a LLM and edited by this PM, right? And so I said, okay, finally, I say, please create this feedback form following design guidelines of Amazon. Please keep multi-select options no more than 5, because I said the options are a lot. And it gave me this thing. Yeah, pretty similar to Amazon, isn't it? But now the thing is, and it explains everything great, but my point is, my concern is when I go here and I start testing, my problem was, okay, this looks a little different. Yeah, my problem was that there was things like order fulfillment and competitive pricing. Now, these terms are not understood by users. So I said that, give me some options for this. And then I'm saying, just don't use accurate order fulfillment. Don't use don't use competitive pricing. Use reasonable pricing. Use everything matched my order, because that is what they mean, right? And it made changes to the form. And now we have everything matched my order, reasonable price, great packaging, and all that. And finally, I said, okay, I don't like this. For example, like now that I'm fine with options and all, the problem is I feel that very poor, excellent, these are far from these stars, right? So they don't match into the UI guidelines usually that we follow, because these feels disjointed. People won't correlate very poor with 1 star, poor with 2 star and all that, because they're far in the space. So I said, give me some options. And these are the options that came. It's not great. And I said, okay, remove everything else, add very poor and excellent. And it did this. I can either align these, or at this point, I made a judgment call saying that people understand 5-star ratings. So why don't we just remove this, given that we are not reaching anywhere? And this is the final one. Now, of course, I need to improve this a little, because this just is black, black, black. But you get the point, right? So we are here to help, start and return or exchange, contact customer service. And this will, again, lead to some link and all that, and you can submit feedback. But this very simple screen, the thing is, you could have arrived here in 5 different ways. And one of the ways you could have arrived here is, look at Amazon. You could just clarify which company are we building for, which stage we are building for, which this we are building for. You could have asked all these questions directly. You could add that to LLM and you could have created something like that. But that does not show you are a good PM, right? That just shows that you can take a prompt, you can feed it into LLM, and you can create a sort of like MVP. What you want to transfer is still like you are a PM who can now create a prototype PRD and solve a product sense problem all in 30 to 45 minutes. My sense is this should be 45 minutes interviews, not 30 minutes, because 30 minutes is too low a time. But in 45 minutes, if you can show this much, I think it's amazing, because what it means is you just showed that you can 3 to 4x your productivity in core PM jobs, right? And that is what interviewers want to see. Okay. Do QA and close with success metrics, and that is there, right? So this is broadly like what sort of good answer look like. Now let's talk about what are some good questions and what a good response would include, because I show you one response, but one is not a great sample size to show everything that is needed to create a good answer. So let's talk about that. But before that, there is a course announcement I have to make. So we just made our first course live at Maven with Advanced Tech and AI Program for PMs. Now, this is not the first cohort. This is the third cohort that we are running. And you can use this code PMC150 for $150 off with the course. Now, if you're not sure about this course, I'll just talk a couple of minutes, because I feel like without talking about the course, it does not give a great sense of what it is all about. So the goal of this course is very simple. I didn't want to create another learning program. What I wanted to do is, can you build production-ready AI products in 8 weeks with me? So there are like 4-hour sessions that happen on Saturdays. These sessions is where you learn, you do breakout room exercises and all. But then there is also a 2-hour working session where you actually like pick a capstone project of your own choice, or you can do this project in groups. So either solo or groups, you pick a capstone project and you actually build this AI product in 8 weeks. Every week we are sitting for 2 hours. And we are just like building more and more things. So for example, the current cohort that is running, today is like Saturday is 9 to 11 is another working sessions. And today people will have already created their AI prototypes. They'll be integrating OpenAI or Claude APIs into it, right? And next week, they will be optimizing the system prompt for that. So as we cover more and more, and then week after that, they will be adding agentic capabilities to it if it needs agentic capabilities. All in all, so the idea is to actually like build production-ready AI products rather than you learning more about AI, because AI is the first, I believe, like for the first time in product management that I've seen so far, and in fact, like for the last 30 years, 35 years, there has been product management domain. For the first time, PMs can actually build products, right? And that is a great learning opportunity, something which was not available when I was starting or when a lot of PMs were starting. So that is where this course shines. And of course, like if you're not sure about this, another option for you is to go to like pmcurve, apply here. So normally we do a shortlist. That is how I run most of my programs. we will do a short list, and we normally conduct a Q&A 30 days before the program starts, which should be somewhere around 20th August. So you can attend the Q&A, you can make the decision for you, or you can directly go. And if you're sure that this is a right program for you, you can directly go there. Okay. Okay, now let me take some questions and let me see if my solution, how my solution can be. So there is a question about next session, mostly next week, but I've not announced it yet. Same time next week. Please be on lookout. Like, just like subscribe to Growth Catalyst newsletter and you'll get something, or just since you're already subscribed to this session, you'll also receive an email from Evan around that. For the returning users post-purchase. I think, Ashika, your question is already answered in the design. Won't these require a lot of clarification with the interviewer? We have done the clarification bit. Okay, is there any question I'm missing? Can you repost it? Okay. So question is, you said best way to segment is dimensions. Can you please explain the concept of dimensions again? So dimension is, think of it like age is a dimension, right? So when I say that I have to build a library, age is a great dimension to think around, because the design choices of that library differ according to the age. So for a child between 1 to 10 years of age, this will be a different library. In fact, 2 to 5 years of age, it will be a different library. 5 to 10 years of age will be a different library. 10 to 15 will be different, and so on and so forth. But if I'm building a library for adults, anywhere between 20 to 50 or 60 years, it's not going to be a difference. So when I'm building a library for adults, age is not a great dimension. But taste of the reader can be a great dimension. For example, do they read fiction? Do they read business non-fiction? Do they read something else? Right? So age is a great dimension for some, depending on the design problem. Similarly, like if you look at behavioral sort of behavioral aspect, taste is a great dimension for building a library. And you can take this to anyone, any of the design problems. Suppose like there's a design problem for teleportation device, which is a very popular design problem from Google. Now, when it comes to teleportation device, what you'll end up realizing is a great dimension is business versus consumer, because the choices that you make in designing that product is very different if it is a consumer versus if it is a product, versus if it is a business, right? For businesses, the pricing model, the kind of requirement, the kind of needs will be very different. So B2B versus B2C is a great dimension. But even in B2B, there are like sub dimensions possible, which is SMBs will have a very different requirement, and these will have a very the other sort of enterprise will have a very different requirement. And then the second is use case. Use case is a great dimension. So it could be like if the technology is limited for a teleportation device in terms of weight and size and height, again, you can dimension that with like teleporting expensive materials versus teleporting something else and something else, right? So use case becomes a good dimension. So normally behavioral and jobs to be done or use case, these are like very clear dimensions that we can come across. But depending on the problem, you can find other dimensions. For example, when it comes to home buying, I have not bought a home yet. So for me, the concerns are very different as compared to a returning user. But when it comes to e-commerce, maybe new user behavior does not have to be very, very different than returning user, or not e-commerce. Let's say it's UPI payments or payments in general. The new user behavior does not need to be very, very different than returning users. So while some dimensions will not work for a particular design problem, it will work for another problem where the different subcategories of a dimension require different design choices, require different product design. Okay. Again, something which we can go in detail possibly in the next session, but for now, I'll limit myself to this. Okay, so there are a lot of questions around the course. Let me take 2 minutes and let me clarify this. So there are two ways. One is basically you can go to pmcurve.com. You can go to this program, you can apply. And this way, like by 20th, you'll receive an invite for Q&A. All your questions will be answered and you can just sort of sign up for the program after that. This one is on Maven. So this is the URL. I'm just pasting the URL. You can go here. And the price is same on the website and here, right? So this coupon code kind of like keeps the price similar to the website. So you can go here, you can apply this PMC 150 and you can sign up directly. Now, the reason I still keep a shortlisting criteria is because I know that folks outside India or folks who are like in leadership position in PM, they're comfortable with making this call. But a lot of junior PMs or IC PMs are not comfortable making this call. So they have a lot of questions before signing up. So that's why we do the apply criteria. This also helps us filter out aspiring PMs. So we don't have any aspiring PMs or business folks in these programs. This is purely for like PMs or founders. So it helps me filter out those people. But at Maven, I can make it live with an option directly to enroll, right? And that is easier for people who are sure about taking this program. Okay, let's get to the main part, right? No, this is my favorite part, by the way. Like the reason is because whenever I'm looking at, let's say, any problem and any solution to that problem, let's say there is a specific problem we covered and solution to it, it does not give me enough confidence that I can solve similar problems to this problem, right? And what I need is more of a blueprint or template that I can follow while going through this problem. So the first question, if I'm trying to generalize what we discussed so far, is can my solution be different or better? And my answer is yes and yes. See, interview in this case is about showcasing your thinking skills and adaptability. Adaptability is very important because LLMs are probabilistic creatures and they will give you very different kind of outputs, even if you tweak a certain word in a particular prompt. And what we are looking for when we are hiring like AI PMs as product leaders are, can this person adapt to like the output of an LLM? Can they work with that output? Can they refine that output and all that? Because what we know is there's nothing as perfect prompt, right? In fact, as the model evolves, the nature of the prompt, the way the prompt works, the perfect prompt also changes. So the key skill right now for next 2 to 3 years is actually adaptability and thinking skills and nothing else. And the second is basically the same question can have multiple good solutions. Because in fact, like I said, like in my slides, I wrote that I'll focus on new users and there are rationales for that. But while solving, I said we'll focus on returning users and there are good rationales for that. It all depends on how you take this interview forward. What are the answers you get from the interviewer? What are the constraints you put and so on and so forth. But the hallmark of a good question is actually it can have multiple good solutions. The hallmark of a good interviewer is recognizing that the problem can have multiple good solutions and then following the candidate rather than getting the candidate to the answer that they have in mind. Okay. And in that spirit, good responses will generally include product sense, strategy, and growth if required. Now, product sense, like I said, is prevalent. If you're at a leadership position, I would want you to think about strategy also. Like the question we asked around platform versus product, that is a strategic viewpoint. right? So I want you to take a strategic view while solving these problems also. Growth is where like, if you want to go into GTM and all, great, but growth is usually shown by copywriting and all in these AI prototyping interviews. Because if you can write a good converting page, a good converting prototype, I think people can believe that you can do a growth role very, very well. The second is like showing your prompt engineering skills. And we have already discussed this at length. The third is being adaptive to learn using AI. So the thing, what you'll notice is when you give it a requirement, LLM actually gives you some of the ideas that you didn't think of. And there are two routes you can take from there. The first route is that, oh, I didn't think of this. And the second route is, oh, great. This is a great idea. Let me take this. And the difference in mindset between the two determines whether you'll thrive with AI or you'll merely like survive with AI. If you keep judging yourself by every new idea or good idea that the tool gives you as, okay, I have failed here, you'll not be able to succeed in these interviews. And worst, you'll not be able to successfully use AI in your job also. So in interviews also, when you see something that you missed, and that kind of like AI kind of highlighted that out, take that as an input, be positive around it, include that and move forward. Because that shows adaptability. Don't get demoralized that I missed something or other, because the job of AI is to help you get to a particular position faster. It is not your job to cover every angle, because if you cover every angle, what is there AI or LLMs for, right? So the idea is to do it faster and in a more adaptable way. The next thing is highlight where you would have taken more time while doing it in real job. Now, this is a mistake a lot of PMs do, which is like they feel that interview framework is different than doing job. Whereas the best interviews actually are very, very similar to, the responses are very, very similar to how you'll do this particular thing at job. The litmus test that I taught like a couple of cohorts for PM interviews, and these were like experienced PMs. And the litmus test I gave them is come up with an idea so that you are compelled to actually build it if you are at that company, right? If you're asked, how will you improve this app? Can you think of ideas which will be compelled to implement if you are a Google Maps PM? Because if you're not there yet, there is always some scope of improvement, either in your domain knowledge or your product knowledge or your user knowledge. Because that is what differentiates good PMing versus bad PMing, right? So that's a litmus test for interviews also. The next is like show that you can design, you can test a prototype, copywriting skills, and finally, keeping calm when LLMs don't understand you. You will go through phases where LLM is just getting into a loop, or it is giving you a lot of garbage, I would say, for the lack of better word. Your goal should be to quickly either like open a new chat window so that this entire context is gone, or at least get the LLM to the right path as soon as possible without losing your calm. Now, the last segment, another 5 minutes, is good versus bad questions. And my assertion is what makes a question good versus bad is its ability to gauge the right skills for the role, right? If there is a question or there is a response which does not show the right skills for a role, the question or the response or the interview in itself has failed. And the second is what makes a question good versus bad is how heavily it indexes on what's essential versus what can be learned quickly in a role. So if you feel penalized for not knowing N8N, it means that it's usually not a great interview, or it's not a great interviewer. If you get penalized for not using Vercel versus, let's say, Lovable, if you're using Lovable and the interviewer says, can you use Vercel? And you're like, I've not used Vercel and all that, and you're penalized for that, that's not a great interview. Because Vercel is something that you can learn very, very quickly if you've learned Lovable already. So the transference, it's like if an interview judges for very like, very specific skills, very tactical skills, that is not a great interview for a PM, even when it comes to vibe coding interviews. And that is where like you'll see a lot of advice is coming around vibe coding or AI prototyping, which you should avoid, which is how to maintain versioning in vibe coding tools, how to do this, how to do that. In essence, it's basically like you are being taught more and more tactics around these tools rather than sort of how to use these tools to get a particular job done. My question to you would be, as a PM, do you really need to maintain versioning? Maybe like 1 out of 100 projects that you do, you'll need to maintain versioning. But do you really need to maintain production level code and maintain versioning over that code, dev versus production and all that? You don't. I do. I'm a founder. I say I sort of build end-to-end products for POC and prototyping. I do, but for PMs, you don't. And if that is the criteria for an interview, which is like, do you know versioning or not? The answer should always be that I can learn it in 30 minutes, isn't it? Like I can go to Claude, I can just ask it to teach me that, and I'm done with it. What I'm not going to learn, or what I should be refining, is my prompt engineering skills, my troubleshooting skills, my bug solving skills, and all that. How do I get maximum output out of an LLM in minimum amount of time? How do I fact check things? How do I make sure that I'm not taking a hallucinated output and giving it to engineering? How do I make sure that I'm not taking a hallucinated output and making a case for business, right? Those are the skills that you need to refine for yourself, not like tactical stuff, right? So I would want you to avoid learning a lot of tactical stuff. And wherever you're going to learn a new skill or sub-skill in AI prototyping, I want you to ask that question: will this be used in my real job? Am I going to use it in my real job today? If not, then just skip it. Don't focus tons on that, right? So let's take some questions and see if they're good or bad, right? So create a feedback form that adapts based on user rating. Good question if it is for a specific product. But if it is a senior PM, I would ask them to take a platform-based approach, right? And see if they can come with authentication, authorization, information access levels, and all that. That becomes a lot more complicated. Design the current landing page for a D2C company like Dollar Shaving Club. Not a great question, because it merely is asking you to replicate, and all you need is basically, have you worked with a tool? Can you just give it URL and ask it to replicate? And then can you figure out how to sort of adjust pixels it has not mastered yet? It does not test a lot of abilities of a PM. It tests on merely the ability of whether you know a tool or you don't know a tool. And can you like perfect a particular design, pixel perfect it with a particular tool? Redesign a landing page for a D2C company like Dollar Shaving Club. Now, this is not a good question again. And the reason is because when it comes to landing page, when it comes to a particular feature, I think there are constrained areas where you can move on. But when it comes to landing pages, you have endless possibility. And the reason is because I've worked on a lot of landing page optimizations in my career, because I was a growth PM in most of the companies I worked with. And you realize that the constraints are what lead to great landing pages. Like, what is the goal of landing page? What is the positioning of the brand? What is the behavior of various user segments on a landing page? Who is dropping off? Who is not dropping? Which channels is dropping off? Which channels is not dropping? And who are these particular users? And unless you have those deeper level of understanding, you can't optimize or redesign a landing page. So it's just too heavy a ask, too context heavy ask to actually ask you to do that. So redesigning a landing page, again, not a great question. Designing a landing page for a D2C company that has designed a serum that prevents hair loss. This is a good question, because this is a new product. And again, there is not much similarity you can draw from. So it tests your creativity. It tests whether you can write copy. It tests whether, so it tests a lot of skills that PMs need when they're going to launch a new product. It tests your GTM abilities and all that. So this is a good question, whereas the first two were not in designing a landing page. Optimize the landing page for D2C company. This is again a good question, because optimization is all about, and this is a good question for junior PMs, because optimization is all about like picking some areas and saying that we have to run experiment here. We have to run experiment here. We have to run experiment here. We can add a chatbot here, and so on and so forth. So optimization is still a good problem. Redesigning is not, because redesign requires the massive overhaul. Not to mention most redesigns actually fail. So this is like broadly to give you a sense of like what you should focus on, what you should not focus on, because I believe that is the most important bit that you can get out of this session. And if you have that bit sorted out, you can also consume a lot of content around it, even if that content, and take the good parts from that content, right? Even if that content has some suboptimal parts, you can take great parts from that content. So yeah, that's all for this session.